So let's read Tom's response to this. The person that I'm discussing this generic subjective continuity versus the asymmetry argument, not antinatalism itself, because there could be antinatalisms, and there may be antinatalisms that are logical, but the asymmetry type is not, as I'm pointing out. So Tom says, I don't think so, since non-existence entails no experience. So for a person not to come into being means the possible suffering of that person can't occur. GSC simply says that at death one shouldn't anticipate the onset of nothingness or oblivion. And then he says what should be anticipated is more experience, just not in the context of you. That experience might involve a lot of suffering. So let me ask you, if you as an antinatalist were to die, and then after that the life of yet another antinatalist came to exist, you would be fine with that? It's basically the same thing as your life coming after this life, because just another antinatalist that wants to escape suffering. And so it's just one life after the other. So we get rid of your name and you just see yourself as just a source of consciousness, then it's just conscious suffering, and then after that comes conscious suffering. So it's just there's no escaping suffering. But my argument is that is what David Benatar wants to avoid, is the experience of suffering altogether. So like, if let's say a copy of you, a clone of you, is the life that comes after this you, so it's like there was no escape from you at all. There was no escape from that. But what I'm pointing out is that Benatar wants to have a non-experience. So if you weren't born, there wouldn't be a state of painlessness or a perpetual painlessness or perpetual absence of experience. Just this blank. Tom refutes all of that in his essay, Death, Nothingness, and Subjectivity, on naturalism.org. And this person that's asking all these questions, he has confided in me that he doesn't really understand Tom's essay, and he can't follow along with the videos where Tom and I and Elijah Everett discuss these things, and he can't follow along with any videos. So yet he seems to be fine with understanding this stuff in text, so I don't understand why he's telling me that he can't understand the videos and all of that. So I'll get into more detail about all this right now. So here's the asymmetry argument. So it says exists, and then over here it says never exists. So my point is that it is saying it's an argument against experience versus no experience. He says here there is an absence of pain, and he says absence of pleasure. He's not talking about particular people. He's talking, because he says that all lives are bad, no matter the situation. No matter if you are Elon Musk and having a great time, he says that life is bad too. And it's every single life is bad. And so he would say that no life, all lives, no matter how great they're going to be, it's morally wrong to cause any life. And so in this way, it becomes an argument of experience versus no experience. And the only way this argument can make sense, whether or not Benatar comes out and says this, but the only way it can make any sense is if there is a state of no experience or a state of non-experience, which most people refer to, or what they mean by nothingness, is a perpetual state of non-experience, a blankness, or what some call a black void, silent black void, no thoughts, no experience, blah, 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 all that, versus there being experience and pain. As Tom Clark pointed out in his response to the post on naturalism, on the naturalism Facebook, Tom pointed out that experience itself is unavoidable. And so experience always entails suffering at some point. And this is what Benatar says himself. And I agree. Life inevitably involves suffering. So consciousness, if there is consciousness, it's going to contain suffering somewhere along the lines. So in this way, there's just no avoiding suffering. So here's a thought experiment. Empty universe, no sentient life, and then eventually consciousness comes to exist. So there is conscious experience, and this conscious experience entails suffering. But then it dies, and then sometime after that, consciousness occurs again, in a different location or whatever, but eventually it comes to that there's conscious experience of suffering as well. So there was suffering, and then there was suffering. There was experience, and then there was experience. The one experience ending didn't result in a blockage of the experience that came after that one ended. So that experience ended, and then it was followed by more experience, and which entailed suffering. So there was suffering, and then after that suffering, there was more suffering. This is what Benatar wants to avoid, but it's unavoidable, as Tom said, and his experience itself is unavoidable. And like I said, whenever Benatar eliminates all individual unique factors or situations that an individual has, he's turning it into an argument of a dichotomy, this versus that. As the asymmetry argument is clearly laid out, it's a this versus that thing. It's not, well, what about Peter? His experience is not so bad, but then Elon, his experience is great. And then you have Sally over there, her horrible experience. No, he doesn't point out any of that. He's just saying it's bad versus not bad. And there is no not bad that exists. There is no escaping experience. So another thought experiment would be, so you're an antinatalist, maybe. Let's say the person listening to this is an antinatalist, and a Benatarian antinatalist, persuaded by the asymmetry argument to be. So that's what I'm, the only antinatalism I'm concerned with is the asymmetry argument. Sure, there's plenty of valid reasons to be an antinatalist for every other reasons, but the asymmetry argument is not one of them because, as I'm saying, it's illogical. So you're an antinatalist, and then say that after you die, the life of yet another antinatalist comes after that, and after that one dies, the life of yet another antinatalist comes after that. And after that one dies, the life of yet another antinatalist comes after that. And on and on and on. And so each time there's just this unending desire to have non-experience, to have no experience, to have no experience. For there to be, the only thing we can call it is nothingness or peaceful oblivion. And I'm saying this is required for Benatar's asymmetry argument to make any sense whatsoever. Otherwise, he's not offering anything. What is he offering? If generic subjective continuity is true, then he has nothing to offer, because there's no escaping experience. There's no escaping suffering. And like in my first thought experiment, if you just get rid of the context in which consciousness is occurring, you get rid of the names and everything like that, and you just see consciousness, and then it ends, and then more consciousness, and then it ends, and then more consciousness, and so it is suffering, and then that end, that there is no end, there's no experienced gap, as Tom points out in his essay, Death, Nothingness, and Subjectivity. There's no respite, there's no break. And Tom, Elijah, and I discussed this in our the conversation we had, which is on Elijah's channel, What is Wrong with the World? That's the name of his channel.
There's no cessation of experience. It just continues in other forms, but you as a person don't get to experience that continuity. There's no particular person that is continuous. It's just that subjectivity is never absent for itself in all these different forms. So Elijah, in Harris's podcast, he says, and this is an interesting way to express it, he says there's something eternal. There's a kind of eternality, eternal about consciousness. So that was interesting, a way to put it that way.
Something internal.
Eternal.
Eternal, okay.
Yeah, not internal, but eternal.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. It's timeless or transcending time. And Ted, you put this in a really nice way. You said it's kind of like a time machine.
Yes, unconsciousness is a proverbial time machine. Yeah.
I like that. That was really cool. But I just got Anil Seth's new book about consciousness being you. Do you guys know about Seth? Anil Seth, he's a neuroscientist and researcher in consciousness. Anyway, he's a really interesting, very smart guy, doing great work on consciousness. But he introduced in his first chapter. I'll read this to you because this is just out. Okay. This is page 8 and 9. He says, excuse me, our conscious experiences are part of nature, just as our bodies are, just as our world is. And when life ends, consciousness will end too. When I think about this, I am transported back to my experience, my non-experience of anesthesia, to its oblivion, perhaps comforting, but oblivion nonetheless. The novelist Julian Barnes, in his meditation on mortality, puts it perfectly. When the end of consciousness comes, there is nothing, really nothing, to be frightened of. So there he is. I think he's talking about, he says, my non-experience.
Experience of no experience.
Right. Yeah. So, and he talks about it as oblivion. And this is interesting, perhaps comforting. So anyway, there he says there's nothing to look forward to. Well, I mean, he's kind of playing on this. Nothing to be frightened of.
On the contrary.
But and this brings up a point that Ted, you've emphasized, and I get at it a little bit in my paper, but you made a more definite point of it, which is that the fact that we don't have nothingness to look forward to is actually itself is a bit scary, because we can't look forward to oblivion.
Right.
It's not, and this is what you see, all those headstones with rest in peace on them. Now, what is that but looking forward to an experience of non-experience, where you get a respite from being conscious, right? You're resting there in a nice state of unconsciousness.
Yeah, Richard Dawkins recently said in a book review of Katie Englehart's book, The Inevitable, he said that death would be a transition to our peaceful oblivion. It sounds nice, but yeah.
Right. So it is something that you could possibly look forward to, and unfortunately, we can't. Which is kind of a drag, because, as Alan Watts puts it at the end of his lecture on death, he says there's no escape. There's no escape from subjectivity. the I always recreates itself in all these different places and times and types of sentience. And the fact that there's no escape from consciousness is, to me, I mean, that's a
It doesn't make sense that Benatar would say, oh, well, I die, so that's all I was talking about, because the life that comes after this is going to be, uh, I'll be fine with that, you know. No, he's saying, yep, no, that life is just as bad. So there's no escape from life. You know, he says this life, the current life, the life listening to this is bad, but whenever it ceases to exist, guess what? The life after that's just as bad. And according to the asymmetry argument, it's just as morally wrong to have been caused. So there's no escaping life, and if you say that every life is bad, then it nullifies the asymmetry argument, makes it futile because there's no escaping life, and he's just saying life is bad. So it falls apart. It actually just demolishes his asymmetry. It makes it utterly pointless, and so it is generic subjective continuity makes his argument completely futile because there's no escaping suffering. Um, I don't understand. Yeah, I totally agree with Tom. Like if this particular body, this particular biological entity, uh, wasn't born, then it wouldn't suffer. But my lack of existence wouldn't cause uh, an escape from suffering, wouldn't cause an escape from the experience, which entails suffering. So it it doesn't really matter, you know, if I were born or not. There would still be experience of suffering. There would still be consciousness. And it doesn't matter if Benatar addresses this or not, or if he knows this or not. As Tom pointed out, um, there are plenty of PhD, high-ranking philosophers that believed in nothingness, and it's nonsensical, as he points out in his essay. It's nonsensical. So it doesn't matter if oh, I'm the authority of I'm at Cambridge or Oxford or blah blah blah, and I have my PhD, therefore everything I say is true. No, there's plenty of PhD people that say nonsensical crap, and plenty of them can be religious and stuff, and atheists would say, oh, they're completely illogical to believe in this, you know. So yeah, the whole like ooh PhD, that has why bring that into the conversation? It has nothing to do with anything. It's silly. So, yeah, I am saying that Benatar uh, unconsciously believes in some sort of perpetual, persistent nothingness or something like that. It doesn't matter what you call it. He believes in an absence of pain, as if he calls it the absence, or he has called it the state of neutrality on the Cosmic Skeptic uh, interview he did with Alex O'Connor. Him and Alex kept referring to it as the state of neutrality, or this neutral state. And you'll notice that almost all antinatalists keep in videos that they make, in memes that they make, they refer to the void, and they create this dichotomy that just doesn't exist, and they use the language of like state of nothingness and things like that, the void. Can't get around it because ultimately it's a requirement. And one doesn't have to admit it or be aware that they believe in this thing. There are people that uh, they're not aware that they're actually superstitious. Um, there's a lot of things people aren't aware of that of their belief in. Just like Benatar points out that people aren't aware of just how bad life actually is. And I agree with that. I can agree with that. Life is often like the inconvenience of just little annoyances and things like that. So yeah, I agree. Like even like Elon Musk, uh, in Benatar's view, Elon Musk wouldn't there could be uh, no experience versus the annoyance of having food stuck in your teeth, you know? Just a tiny little annoyance. But in comparison to uh, what Benatar imagines, the absence of pain, there is no absence of pain because of generic subjective continuity. Pain itself, experience itself, is unavoidable. So there's nothing to refer to as the absence of pain. Sure, if Elon Musk didn't exist, then that particular uh, experience of pain wouldn't occur. That particular one consciousness, but there'd still be experience either way. So if Elon died, and then the life that came after that was, you know, uh, Sam, and Sam experiences pain or whatever, then the death of one consciousness didn't result in an absence of experience. It resulted in yet more experience. So, whenever you just look at it as, remove everyone's name and just see people as, experience machines or something like that, or just consciousness itself, as I pointed out in the thought experiment, where empty universe, and there's consciousness, and that consciousness ends, and then there's more consciousness, and then that consciousness ends, and then there's more consciousness. It's pain after pain after pain after pain. It doesn't, from the perspective of experience itself, it's just unending. It's just uh, for itself. There's just this continuous stream of unending experience, you know. That's why it's called generic subjective continuity, is because there is a continuation of experience. It's just in different context. I feel like I covered everything that I wanted to say, so that's it for this. Thank you for listening.